In this video, I'm going to be showing you just how easy it is to create professional quality prints, a bit like this one, from home. And I'm also going to show you the importance of choosing a good printer and paper. We all know that we live in a digital age where most people will just post their photos on social media or on their websites and be done with it. But we actually forget how much of an emotional impact it can have to hold a physical print. Instead of just being pixels on a screen, it becomes an actual physical piece of artwork. It's then something that can be treasured instead of becoming lost amongst the millions and billions of photos that exist on the internet. Today, I'm going to be using the Canon PRO-300. This printer has 10 pigment-based inks, which is a really important factor if you want to produce long-lasting prints. This printer also has a matte black ink as well as a photo black ink, which gives it a bit of an edge over smaller printers like the Canon PRO-200, particularly if you want to be printing matte fine artwork, as that matte black ink will give you that edge and that extra quality. So the paper I'm going to be using in this video is our very own PermaJet paper. We've got quite a wide variety of paper, covering from everyday papers to your archival fine art. So I'm going to be using a selection of different ones in this video, so that you can see the actual difference that paper choice can make on your image, and just how important it is to try out different papers and see what works for you. A question that we get asked here at PermaJet all the time is, which paper should I use? But really there's no straightforward answer, because it's highly dependent on, firstly, your personal preferences, because some people love gloss, some people hate it. It's also dependent on the kind of images that you're going to be printing and how they look. So it's really not simple and straightforward, unfortunately. It's easier for myself and my colleagues at PermaJet because we're so familiar with the papers and how they work and their nuances. But for someone who hasn't tried every single PermaJet paper, we appreciate it's going to be a bit more difficult to make that decision. So that's why we always recommend trying a PermaJet Test Pack for those of you who are either new to printing or new to our range. This is a great starting point because each test pack has a couple of sheets of every paper from each of our ranges. So it's a great way for you to actually try out your images on those different surfaces, see how they react and see if you like how they look, and then you can narrow down to which papers you would like to use going forward. So I'm going to print the first image on Oyster 271. This is actually our best seller. It's in the digital photo range, and we describe it as being a really great all-rounder. It's a very versatile paper. It has a bright white base and a nice subtle silk oyster sheen to it. So it works really well with quite a wide variety of images. I'm also going to show you the process of me printing this image. Now, if you already know how to print, then you might want to skip to the next section of the video where we talk about paper. But for now, I'm going to show you exactly how to print. So the first thing you're going to do is open your image in Photoshop. In this case, I have set up an A4 canvas and placed my image onto it with a bit of a border, as that's how I would like it to print. You're then going to go to File and Print, which will open up the Photoshop print settings. So you need to make sure you've selected your printer at the top here. Then the next step is to make sure you have selected Photoshop Manager's colors. You don't want to select Printer Manager's colors, as this allows the printer to basically use its own color management, which is not going to be predictable, consistent. So we always recommend Photoshop Manager's colors. This allows you to then select your own ICC profile. You would then select your ICC profile here. So an ICC profile is something that essentially tells your printer what paper you're using and how it should lay down the ink to get the correct colors and the correct results. So we always recommend using a profile. We have generic ICC profiles available on the PermaJet website for the whole range of paper for most Inkjet desktop printers and wide format printers. If your printer's not on there, you can get a custom profile made, which is where you print something off and send it in to us for us to create a profile just for you and your specific printer. You can also get this done even if we have generic profiles for your printer. It will basically make sure you get really, really good results. So we recommend trying the generic ones first, see how you get on with those. If you're not happy, you can then get a custom profile made, which is a free service if you're using PermaJet paper. So I'm going to select my profile. Also, just to add, if you're not sure about profiles or how to create a custom one, we have a selection of videos and a web page which tells you exactly how to create a custom profile, how to install them, everything. So I found my profile here for Oyster, for the Pro-300. I'm just going to take note of the media type, which we put at the end, abbreviated on the profile, so PPPSG. So I'll select that one. I'll make sure I have perceptual selected. We always recommend choosing perceptual, but we do have a blog on our website which describes what the different rendering tents do. But generally, we always say perceptual is your safest option. And then you want to make sure you have black point compensation ticked as well. Now I can ignore the rest of this unless you want to play around with the size and the scale of your image, but in this case I don't need to. So I'm going to then go into print settings. This then opens up the actual printer driver and allows you to have a little bit more control over your print. So I need to make sure I've got A4 selected here. And then you will select this drop down and go to quality and media. This allows you to select the paper type. That's where I told you to take note of what was on the end of the profile. So you've got here photo papers, because Oyster is a photo paper, and then we will select photo paper plus semi-gloss, which is the abbreviated PPPSG. So something else to also take note of is the color matching panel. If you're using a Mac like I am for this video, you won't need to do anything or turn off any of the color management, as it is already turned off on a Mac. But if you're using a Windows PC, you will need to go in and manually turn off the color management. But we have videos that shows you exactly how to do this if you're not sure. So then I'm going to save that. And that's everything. So now I can hit print. Okay, so now our first print has come off the printer. As you can see, this is on Oyster. Now I really like how this has come out. It looks pretty much how it does on the screen. Maybe slightly less vibrant, but that could be due to me using a generic profile rather than a custom profile. So it feels, you know, really high quality. It's something you could easily put on your wall or enter into a competition. It's got a nice punch to it. The colours look really nice and there's lots of detail. But I think we can do better. However, firstly, I'm going to print another image to show you as a comparison, which is going to be a black and white image. And so here we have the black and white image on Oyster. So I've picked an image that has lots of contrast and deep blacks in it because I wanted to demonstrate to you just how good the Canon Pro-300 is at printing blacks, which we'll come into a little bit more later. But as you can see, it's really come out lovely. It's got lots of detail and contrast. The white base of Oyster really lifts all these highlights here. You get a really nice contrast. So in case I didn't mention, Oyster is from our digital photo range, which is what we describe as the kind of everyday papers. You've got your gloss, your smooth matte papers. There's also a few more creative choices in there, and these papers are all available in Test Pack 1. Another paper that I'm going to print on today from the digital photo range is Titanium Lustre. So I'm choosing this one because it's one of our more creative papers. It's got a metallic base to it. So it's really nice for scenes where you've got lots of water or where you've got a subject that's made of metal, because it will really bring it to life and have that pop to it. But it's also just quite a nice one to use for things where you want it to look a bit more interesting, like a creative portrait or even a wedding photo where you want that impact. So here we have the colour image on Titanium Lustre. I wouldn't usually pick titanium for an image like this, but I actually quite like how it's come out. It's very subtle, but you can see the metallic effect in some of the areas, particularly in the warmer clouds over here. It really comes through and adds a nice metallic quality. Also in some of the highlights on the grass, particularly on the lighthouse as well. So comparing it to Oyster, I think you can see that it's The results are very similar, but the titanium luster just gives it a little bit more of a pop. And I actually think it looks a lot nicer, it looks more creative. If you had that on the wall, it would stand out just a little bit more than the Oyster would. And here we have the black and white image on titanium luster. So again, it's quite subtle. What we recommend with metallic papers is it's actually better to select images that have lots of white areas if you really want to get the metallic effect. The reason for that is that printers, if you don't know, don't have white ink in them. They rely on the whiteness of the paper base. So any white areas where there's less or no ink laid down is just going to be having that sheen from the metallic paper coming through. Whereas the areas where there's lots of ink laid down, like these black areas, you're not really going to see the metallic effect because there's quite a dense amount of ink laid down on top of it. You will still get a subtle kind of sheen to it, but you're not going to get that real nice metallic look, which you can see in the flower here. So again, it wouldn't have been my first choice for titanium luster, but I quite like how it's come out. I think it's quite nice. So just as a reminder, both of those papers, Oyster and titanium luster, are from the digital photo range, which is available in Test Pack 1 if you want to try those out. So I'm going to move on next to the Fibre Based range, or the FB Baryta range as we sometimes call it. This is the next step up from the digital photo range, and these papers are all made from high quality alpha cellulose materials. Now this range is reminiscent of traditional darkroom materials, so it's kind of replicating the silver halide traditional things that you would have seen in the darkroom. So they're much higher quality, as I said. You get a lot more detailed quality prints with a wider toner range, much deeper blacks. They're also heavier weight, so they have a nicer quality feel to hand. And they're also acid free as well, so they're longer lasting. And we recommend that people select this range if they want that next step up and they want to produce, exhibition quality prints. So the first paper I have chosen is FB Gold Silk 315. The reason I've chose this one to show you today is because this paper has a nice warm base tint to it. It's slightly off-white. So I think it will work quite nicely with the images that I selected today because they have that nice warmth to them. The other thing that I like about Gold Silk as well is that it has one of the highest Dmaxs in our range. When it was reviewed in Professional Image Maker magazine, it was described as being a record-breaking Dmax. So Dmax, if you're not aware, is the density of the blacks in the paper. It's basically the amount of black that you can achieve in the print. So the higher the Dmax, the deeper the blacks they will be on that paper. So again, I think this will also demonstrate the quality of the PRO-300 printer because it can print really nice deep blacks. So this is my colour print on the FB Gold Silk paper. It's come out really, really nice. The warmth of the paper has just lifted the kind of warm tones of the image a little bit. And that's something to remember when you are printing and selecting a paper, is that the white point of the paper is going to influence the way your image looks because the white shows through, particularly in the white areas of the image. So if you use a really cold white paper, that's going to look a lot more contrasty and stark. Whereas if you use a warm paper, it's going to give your image obviously a warmer look. So if I compare it to the Oyster that we printed on earlier, I can see that the Gold Silk actually has much deeper blacks. So if you look at the grass areas, there's a lot more shadow detail here. It's come out with a lot more contrast than the Oyster. It's quite subtle. It's only when you look closely that you can really see on the lighthouse as well. The shadows are a bit deeper. So overall, the image has a bit more contrast to it, a bit more of a punch. So the Fibre Based range was actually introduced particularly for monochrome images, and we always recommend considering this range if you're producing black and white work. The reasons for that is that you get a really nice tonal range, you get the deep blacks, you get the high levels of detail, so it works really, really well for black and whites. Now, using the PRO-300 in combination with Gold Silk on an image that has these really deep blacks has produced a really nice result. As you can see, the blacks are really nice and velvety and dark. And if I just compare it to Oyster, I can definitely see the difference in the warmth of the paper here. It's a lot more noticeable on the black and white because you are relying on those tones. So the gold silk has got quite a warmth to the whiteness of the flower, whereas Oyster is a lot starker. It's got a much whiter white, which is absolutely fine. I think when it comes to something like this, it proves that it is down to personal preference, because you might like that extra little bit of warmth that the gold silk gives to the flower, or you might want something that is really stark and white. So that's something where we can't always recommend which one you go for, because it's going to be down to which one you like best. So the next paper I've chosen to show you from the Fibre Based range is FB Matte 285. This is the first matte paper we're printing on today, and I've picked it for that reason really. It's a smooth matte paper, it's got a nice weight to it, and it's a great choice for landscapes and things where you do want that kind of smooth fine art finish. So this is the image on FB Matte, and it's actually printed really, really nicely. The benefit of a matte paper is that it gives the image a lot more depth, because you're not getting distracted by the reflections of light on the surface. So like if I compare it to the gold silk, you can see it really draws you into the image. You're not getting that sheen on it if you're moving it around in the light. So again, matte papers are beneficial for if you're displaying wall art, because you're not going to get the distracting glare when you're moving around in the room. So comparing it side by side with gold silk, the gold silk definitely has more contrast to it and deeper blacks, but the FB Matte has more of a kind of a fine art feel. So it really depends on what kind of look you want to achieve. If you're printing an arty image, you're going to want it to have a bit more of an emotional impact, as opposed to looking super bold and vibrant, but both look really nice. So this is a really good demonstration of where the PRO-300 is excellent at producing deep blacks on matte papers. In previous printers, this is something that was quite often a struggle. Blacks would sometimes come out quite flat and muted on matte papers, but the PRO-300, they introduced a new feature, which was the deep blacks on matte papers, and you can see it's got a really nice finish to it. So now I'm going to move on to our fine art range, which we break down into smooth and textured fine art, just to help people differentiate between the level of surface texture that they want to print on. Both ranges are made up of a mixture of different kinds of fine art papers. Some are made from 100% cotton rag, some are made from alpha cellulose, and some are a mix of the two. Both of these materials are really high quality and acid-free. We also have a few OBA-free papers in the range, which for those of you that don't know, we have various articles that cover what these are. But this range is the best of the best. It's the kind of paper you're going to want to print on if you're producing archival fine art prints that you want to last for hundreds of years. And you know, it's great for exhibitions, for selling prints, or if you just want to produce something that has a really nice arty feel to it, or a texture, because you won't be able to achieve that in the other ranges that we've covered. So the first paper I've chosen is Photo Art Silk 290. This is actually quite a unique paper because it is a matte paper, but it's got a very subtle silk sheen to the surface, which makes it a really nice choice for things that are a bit more creative. It's also really nice for landscapes with water in, because it gives it that kind of subtle watery effect, which I will show you in a moment. So here we have our colour print on Photo Art Silk. It's come out really, really nice. It's quite hard to describe how Photo Art Silk prints, but as you can see, it does have that sheen to it. But yeah, it still has the fine art feel of a matte paper, and it still has that depth. It's got lots of lovely detail as well. The colours have come out really nice. And I really like it. I think it's a really nice choice for landscapes that you want to have that nice special quality to them. Okay, so I wasn't sure how this one was going to come out, because it wouldn't usually be the kind of image I would print on Photo Art Silk. I'd usually go for much softer images, like landscapes. But I actually quite like it. I'd say the one downside is that with all this deep black, you can really see the texture of the paper. It really stands out in a way that you might not want it to. it doesn't do anything to enhance that part of the image, which is what we would usually print on a textured paper for. But I quite like how it accentuates the droplets on the flower. I think that's quite nice. It is getting a bit of bronzing as well on the bottom half of the image, but overall it's not bad. Comparing it to FB Matte, I think that would still be my first choice for this image. As you can see, the smooth matte finish definitely accentuates this image a lot better than the texture and the sheen of Photo Art Silk. But again, it depends on the kind of effect you want to achieve, but FB Matte would be my personal choice. Next up, I've chosen Portrait Rag 285, which is from the Smooth Fine Art range, but it has a really subtle texture to the surface. So as you can see here, the texture isn't particularly noticeable, especially from afar, but it does help to accentuate little details like the grass. Usually we'd recommend using a textured paper where it's going to actually enhance the image. So for example, if you want to print an old rustic building with lots of detailed brick or areas of wood, then texture should help enhance that image and make it really stand out. With something like this, there's no huge benefit, especially where you've got a sky that's somewhere you might not want to really see texture on a print. But with this one, because Portrait Rag does just have a very subtle texture, it works quite nicely. So if we have a look at the black and white image, it probably wouldn't have been my first choice for an image like this because, again, you don't really want to see areas of texture in the large amounts of black, or the flower because it's smooth petals with water on it. You wouldn't really want to see textured paper in those areas. But it has printed quite nicely because, again, the texture is subtle on this image, but it still probably wouldn't be my first choice. So the final paper that I'm going to show you today is Watercolour Rag 310. This is from our Heritage range. It's a heavily textured fine art paper. So usually we would recommend using heavily textured papers for artwork in particular. So something like this would be really nice with watercolours or paintings where you want to replicate the either the texture from the paint or the original artist paper that the painting was done on. But also it can be great for photography too. If you've got an image subject that has lots of texture in that you want to accentuate, or if you want to make the photograph look a lot more artistic, then a heavily textured paper like this one could be really beneficial. It wouldn't be something I would choose for these images that I'm printing on today, but I'm going to print on it anyway just to demonstrate to you how it looks. And who knows, you might be surprised, it might look really nice. You never know with paper, so let's give it a go. Okay, so this is our image on Watercolour Rag. I don't really like it, to be honest. I think the texture is far too distracting for this particular image. And that's not to say it's a bad paper, it just doesn't work for this subject type. I think especially as before in the sky, the texture is quite distracting and it just doesn't really add anything to the image, which is what we would want a texture to do. Now in some cases with texture that's as heavy as this one, you would want to print bigger because on a small size like A4, the texture can be quite dominating. Whereas the bigger you go, the less the texture is going to kind of overwhelm the smaller details of the image. And again, with the black and white, it doesn't really work. The black and white is printed beautifully in terms of the tonal range. And again, it's printed really nice deep blacks. But with an image like this, where it's got a really large area of just one solid colour, you tend to want to print on a smooth paper so that the texture's not distracting you. And I think, again, the small details on this flower, like the water droplets, they're kind of getting merged in with the texture of the paper, so it doesn't really work as well as I would like it to. But again, you know, this paper prints lovely with subjects like art, or if you do want your photograph to look like, you know, a painting, maybe you've applied an effect to it that looks like a painting, then this paper is probably really going to enhance that. But in this case, I just don't really think it works for these subject types. So those are the fine art papers. The latest paper I showed you, Watercolour Rag, is available in the Heritage Discovery Pack, which is its own separate test pack. And then the Portrait Rag and the Photo Art Silk are both available in the Fine Art test pack, if you want to try those out. So I've gone back through everything we've printed on today and I've selected out my favourites, but let me know in the comments which ones were your favourites. So for the monochrome, it's a tough call, I've selected two. So I've gone for the FB Matte, which is the smooth matte paper from the Fibre Based range, and I've gone for Titanium Lustre, which is our metallic paper from the Digital Photo range. And the reason I've selected both of those is with the titanium, I really like the kind of creative feel that the metallic base adds to this image. It gives a kind of a silvery feel to the flower, which is quite nice. And it's the kind of thing I'd expect to see hanging on a wall because it does have that creative look to it. And then with the FB Matte, I've picked that one because I feel like this image benefits from a smooth matte surface. It really helps the subject stand out and gives it that depth to it. With a nice solid black background, you can really pick out all the details of all the water droplets as well. And again, because this image has a sort of still life, fine art look to it. And so I think the matte paper really adds to that. And then with our colour image, again, I couldn't pick between two. So my two favourites were FB Gold Silk from the Fibre Based range and Photo Art Silk from our Smooth Fine Art range. And the reason I have picked those two, with the Gold Silk, I really like the warmth that this paper brings to this image because the image does have very warm tones to it. You know, you've got the warmth in the clouds and in the grass. And so I think a bright white paper kind of takes away from that a little bit. Whereas the warmth of Gold Silk is really nice. And you've also got the nice deep blacks in the shadows down here. It adds that bit of extra contrast to the lighthouse as well, which makes it stand out a bit more. So I think that looks really lovely. And then surprisingly, my other favourite was Photo Art Silk. That silk sheen just adds a really nice finish to this image, and I quite like how it looks. So I really hope this video has been helpful for you today, and has hopefully shed light on a few things, one of those being just how easy it is to create professional quality prints when you're using the right materials, such as the Canon PRO-300, which is an amazing printer, and then high quality inkjet paper, such as the PermaJet range. I also hope it's helped you understand just how important paper choice is when it comes to the different surfaces and materials that are available out there. As you can see from the images we printed today, paper choice does have an impact on the final image, but also it shows, you know, how much it does come down to personal preference and the image type that you're printing. So it is really important to experiment, try out different papers and see what works with your particular images or your artwork, and see which surfaces and which ranges of paper you like best. If you do want more information on the PermaJet paper range and also how to print and how to get good results from your printer and your paper, we have 2 free ebooks which are available in the description for you to download, both called The Knowledge, and they're really helpful resources if you are just getting started with printing or if you're trying to understand how to get better prints. Thank you for watching, and if you have any other questions, feel free to leave a comment or get in touch directly with PermaJet and we'd be more than happy to help.